Welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on this show is Tim Healy. He is running for Superior Court Judge for Calaveras County, Department 2. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I don't think I've had you on just the two of us before, is that right?
That's correct. This is our first time, so I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So you are running for a Superior Court Judge. We have two of those judges in this county. Both seats are up for a new person, so we have a couple races going on that are heading toward the general election. There was a primary, and you were one of the top two, which means you're moving on. And you're facing?
Hugh Swift.
Hugh Swift. So, lots of campaigning, I imagine. You're in the thick of it, putting signs up, talking to people, community events, beating the streets.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to do the best we can to get out and meet people and let them know why I feel I'm the most qualified person for the job.
Absolutely. Are you able to keep your energy up, or is it a tiring thing?
It's very tiring, but I'm keeping the energy up. It's having a wife like mine, Rachel. She is very energetic, despite the illness she's had in the last few years. She's just wonderful, and she's such a help. But with her and the kids have been wonderful through the whole process. They've been very understanding. The job has been difficult at work, but at the same time, having time to come and do this, it's something that I really feel is very important and that I want to do, so I make sure that I make time for this and am giving it everything I've got.
You mentioned your family. Tell us more about them. You have a couple kids, is that right?
That's right. I've got Lucas and Shayla. In fact, I just dropped Lucas off at football practice. So he's playing with the Calaveras youth, I think the junior Redskins. And Shayla, he's 9 years old, and he'll be in 4th grade. And then Shayla is 7 years old, so she'll be in 2nd grade. And they're doing wonderful. They're all and very active in the community. Lucas is doing Cub Scouts, Shayla's doing Girl Scouts. They're keeping pretty busy. They both swam this summer on the local swim team. So it's from one event to the next, and with Rachel helping, we're able to get things organized and get things done. So
you mentioned that your wife had an illness. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Honestly, it was just over about 3 years and a week ago. She was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. That was in 2011, in July of 2011. It was kind of an interesting thing because it was out of the blue. She had just gone through the application process for the DA's office as an investigator. And that was here in Calaveras, and was accepted, and they do a complete physical. And 4 months prior, so it would have been in February, I think, March timeframe, they did a full workup on her. Everything was fine. She was feeling a little tired, having some issues in June and the beginning of July, and went to the doctors. Her white blood cell count was through the roof. And so that's how acute lymphoblastic leukemia works. It's incredibly fast moving. In fact, if she had not been treated, if they tell you that if you aren't treated within 30 or 90 days, 3 months, it would be it. You wouldn't be able to live past those 3 months because it would just take you that fast. And quite a few people don't survive that first few months because for any number of reasons, but certainly one of them is the diagnosis doesn't come through till very late, because it's so similar. Just you're sick, you're not feeling well, colds linger, things like that. You get some bruises, and so it was a very interesting process. And because of the specific type of leukemia she had to have a bone marrow transplant. And so she was put into remission by Stanford very, very quickly, which was just wonderful. The doctors were just fabulous there. If you have cancer, that's where you want to go, especially leukemia. They just took care of her. But again, they put her in remission very fast, but she had to have that bone marrow transplant. She's a mixed race. She's part Sri Lankan, and so they couldn't find an adult match for her. She has a brother and a sister. They both match, but each other. And so, which is wonderful for them, but it put us in a position where we still had to find a match. And throughout the whole world, they couldn't find an adult match. That brought us to the only real other option that we had, and that was for an umbilical cord. And what they do is they take stem cells from an umbilical cord once the child is born, they process the blood, and they store it, and then they're able to use it for any number of things anymore. And they're starting to use it and understand that they can use it for a number of different things. Bone marrow transplants are just one of them. And that's when in January 2012, which was kind of ironic because it was the same time that Judge Mawhinney was retiring, and he announced his retirement the same week Rachel was supposed to get her bone marrow transplant. And I had looked at applying for the appointment because I had wanted to do this for years, and I had now qualified, having been an attorney for more than 10 years, and I wanted to bring my experience home. So I thought, what a great opportunity, except the timing was just not the right time. I needed to keep my family together. I needed to take care of the kids at home so that my wife knew that they were taken care of. And for the longest time afterwards, even after the bone marrow transplant, it was still a situation where we just didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't come home. She came home about 100 days later, and it took a while. We didn't really know for about another year and a half, which is right around the time the appointment was made, the new appointment by Jerry Brown, that we were able to see that Rachel was doing very well. We talked to her doctor. Her doctor said, the stress that Rachel's going to deal with during the campaign is going to be nothing compared to what she had to deal with as she was sitting there in the hospital trying to live. So I hope that kind of fills that in. And I know I went through the long version of it, but at the same time, I always try to talk about it because I think it's so very important that people know about it. So very many people don't understand about umbilical cord transplants, and they don't know that you can donate those, and it can I don't want to say it can, it will save a life. And it's just amazing.
So you and your family have gone through a very tremendously difficult time, and yet we have a very healthy wife and family kind of looking toward a bright future. It's just fantastic to hear that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, she's been in remission for 2.5 years, and she was at the doctor's just about 2-3 months ago, right after the election, the primary. They drew blood. Her blood's getting better and better every day, which is phenomenal. So we couldn't be happier.
Where does your family reside in the county?
We live in Wallace. We've been living in the Burson area, so it's really Valley Springs is kind of the way we describe it to everybody, but we live in Wallace. We had been living in Burson area, right on the edge. So Rachel's been here for about 21, 22 years. I've been here now for almost 12.
Okay, and when you're not working as a DA basically, or deputy DA
Deputy
now?
District Attorney.
Okay. And you're not doing the family stuff. What do you like to get out and do in terms of hobbies in the county?
Well, I tell you what, it's been interesting. The last few years have been obviously very focused, and so it's our focus has been Rachel and the kids and trying to keep them as normal as possible, and then focus on getting Rachel better. Before that, it would be golf. For my personal, I love reading books. I love adventure like Tom Clancy, W.E.B. Griffin, people like that. Those are wonderful stories. And then I always loved the golf and sports, so I enjoyed that. Working out, lifting weights, that sort of thing was always something that I enjoyed. And so it's taken a little bit of a back seat for the last few years, and still is with the campaign, but still those are the things that I really enjoy.
You mentioned sports, which kind of takes us back to your childhood.
Yes.
And did you grow up in Indiana?
I grew up in Indianapolis, yes.
Indianapolis, and you grew up in a family that had a sports history. Tell us a little bit about
that. Yes. My dad graduated from the University of Maryland back in 1958, was drafted by, as I recall, it was the Cleveland Browns drafted him and then traded him to the Chicago Bears, where he played for George Halas. And that was, I think, a wonderful time for him. I mean, he loved it. I mean, all through all the stories that we've had, and as growing up as kids, it was his world. I mean, that was what he knew, and he loved it. And then in 1960, the Dallas Cowboys came into being, and they had an expansion draft, and he was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, and got to play for two of the greatest coaches in the history of the NFL, with Papa Bear Halas, and then Tom Landry from the Dallas Cowboys. And so, and then in his second year, it would have been the spring football in 1962, he got hurt. Back then, they didn't keep people on the roster when they got hurt. They let them go. And then he had one game with the Buffalo Bills and then retired. And because he had a family, had to take care of him. Back then, I think he was making some top salary at $16,000 in 1962. In retirement, he makes the NFL has a very good, generous retirement program now, which I think is been wonderful for my parents, and it's been a godsend actually. So
you played a ton of sports as a kid.
It was baseball in the summer, football in the fall, basketball in the winter, and then depending upon how soon baseball started, baseball, and then as we got into high school, it was also track. So we were keeping very busy. It was just one sport to the next.
How did you end up coming west and getting into deciding you wanted to go into law?
Well, it's interesting in the sense that they're not necessarily tied together. I had always loved California, the concept of California. Growing up, California was the land of opportunity, right? I mean, in the 60s and 70s as a young kid, that's, I think, where people looked. Plus Hollywood was there. So it was, in the open outdoors, just wonderful opportunities here to do different things. I think as everybody understands, from where we live, within 2 hours I can be at the beach, or 2.5 hours I can be at the Pacific Ocean. All up and down the beach, Pacifica is a wonderful place. We have a cousin that lives there. And on the other hand, in an hour and a half, I can be at Bear Valley up on top of the 10,000 foot, looking down, going skiing. And so it's such a wonderful opportunity for people who enjoy sports, baseball, softball, golf, you name it, it's there. I think that's what drew me. And to be fair, there was a little bit of that Hollywood mystique that kind of drew me to California. I think from the standpoint of law, what drew me to law, I think I really didn't come to the conclusion that I wanted to try law school until I was like a junior, I think, in college. And I thought, gosh, law school would be interesting. I think I'll give that a shot. I hadn't a lot of other plans, but I thought, my older sister was getting ready to graduate from law school, and we had talked a lot about it, and I knew that I wasn't done with my education. I knew that I wanted more. And so I pursued it, and I came out to California. I went to McGeorge School of Law in Sacramento in '86 through '88, had some problems with grades, and then went back to Indiana and worked for my father for a few years in the automotive aftermarket. And then made my way and earned my way back into law school, and then in '96 I got back in, and haven't looked back since. And I chose to come back to McGeorge in Sacramento. One, I love California, and I knew that I could easily adapt back to the life because I just love the diversity of California, and there's so many different things about it that are wonderful. Not that I don't miss and love Indiana, because that's where I grew up, but there's just so much to do here, and there was so much opportunity that I felt like, and there was this sense of finishing and completing what I started here.
So to prepare you for the position now, you've been working in the DA's office for just about 14 years now.
Just about 14 years. I started as an intern. I did just legal research and wrote some memoranda and things like that. And then also had an opportunity. One of the things that you're allowed to do in the state, at least in the state of California, I presume it's the same way in other states, but when you go to law school, you can become certified after you've taken certain courses. Then courses in evidence, criminal procedure, which is essentially the Fourth Amendment, because that's such a big part of criminal law. And so once you're able to have completed certain core courses, then you can become certified and work in court as an attorney. And so a lot of people do that. And so my fourth year, because in a night program at McGeorge, your fourth year, you're coming up to a lot of your elective courses. So I took an elective that brought us to San Joaquin County at the DA's office, and I worked in the narcotics unit. That was something that I'd always had always had in the back of my head. Law enforcement, I had always just thought, they do wonderful work. They're out there trying to help people, helping bring justice. And I think that was to kind of piggyback that answer to one of the other questions you had about why I chose law and why I wanted. I've always had that sense of and the need for seeing justice done. I just didn't like seeing. I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it, but I thought justice was such an important part of our society because that's a big part of why we were America. I mean, the history of it. And so coming out and working for the DA's office, I thought was a great opportunity to also give a different branch of law, because there's so many aspects to law. You have civil, but civil isn't just civil. There's family law, there's probate law, there's water law, real estate law, personal injury, you name it, and there's an aspect of it, public policy with government. So I worked for a civil attorney to try to get that side of law. I also took international classes at McGeorge, and that has always been back of my mind as something I always thought would be interesting to do. But then I thought, especially after meeting a fellow student's father who had been a deputy DA and also been a judge and was a judge down in Southern California, and he painted a very interesting picture for me, one that really was compelling, one that was really caused me to really sit back and think, I haven't really thought criminal. I should go take a look. And so I talked to some people, San Joaquin County at the DA's office. There's lots of work, unfortunately, in Stockton. But some people had said wonderful things about the office, and I got there and found out why they said such wonderful things. It was a great office. And as the 4-unit class ended, I took work-study courses. And then as the work-study courses ended, I stayed after graduation, and I just kept asking them, hey, can I stick around? I love this. And I did, and then they hired me during the open hiring. Wow. They had. So it was really, I guess, one of those things it was meant to be. And I haven't looked back. I love it. I knew the first week that I was there that this was something that really I wanted to do.
So I'm skipping ahead a little bit because
Sure.
I want to get to some of the local issues. Sure. You put a lot of time in, and then you came to a point where you were thinking, wow, I'd really like to become a Superior Court judge. But
Yes.
that's a big decision. And I just wanted you to take the viewers through, how do you come to a decision like that with all of the different things that you have to think about before you go that way?
I think a lot of it has to do, for me, and I guess I can't really express this in a way that explains it for other people, but for me, there was always, and I kind of touched upon it, that need for justice. And I wanted to see justice done. As I grew and understood that third branch of government, if you will, the judicial branch, I started to understand a little bit more about what they do and why they're so very important. And as an attorney, I've always seen that was the pinnacle position that you would take as an attorney, would be a judge. So I always had that in the back of my mind, getting to know several judges as growing up. And in high school, one of my brother's best friends, even to this day, his dad's a judge, now his sister is a judge. So it was kind of in their family. But you get to see them a little bit, talk to them about what they do on the bench and find out what really happens in a courtroom. And then as I went to law school the first time, then as I was earning my way back, you would pay attention to what's going on. You'd start paying attention in the news as to what's going on in the courts, the Supreme Court level. And then as I went back to law school, that need, I don't hesitate saying need, but it really is to a certain extent a need for me, and a real strong desire to see justice done. And as I worked as an attorney in the DA's office, you get to see any number of judges working, and you'd see the good ones and not so good ones, and you get to see what they're able to accomplish in the courtroom. And I saw and see that while that is the pinnacle position of an attorney, it also is that place where you can really not just seek justice as an attorney, as a prosecutor, as an attorney, but you get to ensure it. You get to make sure that both sides get that fair chance. Each side has every opportunity to be heard, to present their side of the story. And then the judge sits there and says, well, here's my experience. I've had life experience, and my life experience and my legal experience, we're going to put them all together, and we're going to rule on what your position is. First things first, you follow the law, and then you move from there. The idea is to be fair and impartial. And so I think what has prepared me as a prosecutor are those very things, because our job as a prosecutor is to be fair, impartial, and to seek justice and to seek the truth. And that's so very, very close to what a judge does. And so I feel that as I continued to work and see what I was doing and what I wanted to accomplish with my career as a prosecutor, I saw that one other way to accomplish those goals would be as a sitting judge. And so I started looking into it more and more. And you're not allowed to even apply for a judgeship until you've been an attorney for 10 years. And so for me, that happened about the time that Jerry Brown was appointed. And also, there was that real strong desire to bring that home. And I've long since made Calaveras my home and wanted that opportunity. And I was never going to run against the two sitting judges. That would be a mistake. Besides, they were both very good, and they're very, I think, very respected within the community here. So I'm patient, and once I heard that Judge Mawhinney was going to announce his retirement, I was excited, but at the same time, I knew that it was just the timing was just not right because of the family situation with my wife being ill. And so quite honestly, I'd put it out of my head that I was ever going to have that opportunity. I just didn't think that was going to happen because I just didn't know what was going to happen with my wife. So I think once the appointment was made and once I took a look at, as an attorney, you're always evaluating judges and you're always evaluating people in that way based on their experience in the courtroom and how they handle cases. And I know that when I looked at those people who had sought the appointment, I compared myself against them, and I know what my qualifications are, and I looked at everybody's, and I felt, and I don't mean this to seem anything other than that I believe in myself, and so I looked at those qualifications and I felt there isn't anybody here that I feel is that much more qualified than I am, and I felt that every day that Jerry Brown went without appointing someone was another day closer to my wife being cured and her getting better, and the stability of the family was getting better, that I thought, well, maybe I just better keep an eye on this to see if that's something that I could do. And as I talked to more and more people about that, first of all, started with my family, my wife's doctor, my parents. My dad's a deacon in the Catholic Church, and so I have always relied on him. And my mom and very good friends in the community here. And after that, I felt like it was the right thing to do. Once the announcement was made, I looked at the appointment and I thought, in my mind, there's no doubt I'm more qualified than this person. And so I decided that the right thing to do was to run and to give Calaveras County that choice, because I didn't think that Sacramento should be picking our judge.
Absolutely. If you do end up winning in the fall, and you do end up being the next judge or one of these two next judges, what would be a couple of your main goals moving forward?
Well, I think the things that are really important is to generate a stronger relationship with the community, and I think you do that in several different ways. I think they have a program in place every 15 minutes. And I've seen it work in San Joaquin County. I know that it works here, and I think it's a wonderful program. It's the idea behind that is to get judges and the law enforcement community to, as I understand it, to kind of bring the dangers of and the consequences of drinking and driving to students in high school. And they do it in any number of ways. And in San Joaquin County, they've been doing it for years. And I think it's just a great idea. It's nothing that I was ever introduced to in high school. I think for me, it was a little bit different in my family. My father was almost killed by a drunk driver when I was 8 years old. So for me, it was maybe that's why there wasn't as big an impact. When I hear those things and see those things, I think they're great for the community, but I already had long ago made it my determination as to what was a good idea and what wasn't a good idea. But that's one aspect of it, to strengthen that community tie with the children and youth of our community, because I think you have to, and I know that Barbara Yook has tried to improve some programs for them, and I heard on the radio the other day somebody that made too much sense, and that was that you go after the youth, the kids, and you get them involved in the community, you get them caring about the community, and I think the community is just going to be better off, and I think there's going to be less kids that go and take the route of crime. It's one that for many people, they're on the edge of that table and they could go one way or the other, and we've got to give them a reason sometimes. Some kids don't need a reason, but some kids do, and everyone's different. So there's that group of kids that needs that help, that push back into mainstream to understand, look, we love you and we want you in our community. We want you to be a productive member of society. And I think by taking a judge because of the position they have in the community is an important one. It's one of that I've always grown up with a great deal of respect. They are the third branch of government. I think, with the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, I think it's so very important. And so I think they have such a bully pulpit to use to help bring these people to, the young people to those areas in that way. I think I think it's very, very important. I think that's one of the ways I think that I would try to help. I think in other ways, I think I know I've been reading and hearing about they're working on different programs for court. For example, we have a drug court, and I think it's interesting because as a prosecutor we see things from a very biased perspective, and we do. What has to come as a judge, it's a whole different job, and it's one of the things that I've always found interesting when people would leave the DA's office, and we talk about them after they've had an opportunity to appear on the bench. We're thinking, what the heck's going on? They've become liberal, and they're bending over backwards. And I would always sit there and I would kind of chuckle to myself, and I would throw my 2 cents in the conversation. Look, it's a different job. It's similar. I mean, you have to know what goes on in the legal profession. You have to understand how to practice law. You have to understand how the courtroom works, and you have to have that courtroom experience because it's so important. But it's a whole different job. Here as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, you're advocating. Even though as a prosecutor it's a little different, but as a judge, you're there to ensure justice. You're there to make sure everybody has equal opportunity to be heard, and so it's a different job. And I think having that drug court, I think, is a good thing. I know it works in San Joaquin County, and from everything I've heard from Dana File and from everybody else who's involved, it works. And on the other hand, the people going through it, they have to want it to work. The next one is I know they're working on mental health, military. Veterans Court for the military. I think that is absolutely wonderful. When I first heard about it, I was so excited to hear about it because I think it's a great idea. Because so very often, and I've had veterans as defendants throughout the years. They should be treated differently, and I don't necessarily mean they get better deals. What I mean is they have given so much for our society, for our community, for our country, that we need to treat them with more respect. We need to treat them as people who have worth and people who we need to bring back in. And so many of them, because of what they've seen and what they've done, have stepped away from that. So I think the Veterans Court, the mental health calendar, these are all things that we have monies and resources out there that we really need to bring because these people are different. I mean, they really are. They're not your standard criminal who's out there because he wants to make money and that's his business. These are people who need help.
We only have about a minute left.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to leave our viewers with anything?
Well, I think, I'm here because I want to serve Calaveras County. I want to bring the experience I've gained with literally thousands of cases in the courtroom. I want to, I've had my hand in over 30,000 cases. I've handled over 1,000 cases as my own cases that I've dealt with. I've handled family law. I've taught law. I'm doing some civil work. I've done international law. I have a very incredibly broad, I believe, experience that really puts me in a position to be uniquely qualified. It's unmatched courtroom experience. I think that it's just, I want to bring that home to Calaveras because it's so important that Calaveras have the most qualified, but not just experienced people, but it's the right experience.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Joel.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.